Hello, I'm Ian Scales, you're watching TelecomTV, and I'm joined now by Stephen Mellor, who's the CTO of the Industrial Internet Consortium. Stephen, welcome to TelecomTV.
Thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to finding out more about your views on conflicting fundamentals and trust, which I know you've been talking to the conference here today about. And here's my three questions that hopefully will kick the conversation off. Could you just bring us up to speed, first of all, on the Industrial Internet Consortium and where you are with that?
Certainly. The Industrial Internet Consortium was founded 3.5 years ago by 5 global companies, IBM, AT&T, Cisco, GE, and I always forget Intel. There you go, I got it finally. I always forget one. We have a lengthy mission statement, which is the manner of large global companies. But the 3 words that really matter are the last 3, transformational business outcomes. The goal is to accelerate the development of the industrial internet and so change our economy, to go from our current approach of owning things, if you like, towards one which is slightly different. And the World Economic Forum has outlined 4 phases of this. One of them is simply to improve operational efficiency. Another one is pay per use, things like Uber, which I understand is still operating in London just for the moment. Then on to outcome, which was a talk that we had today. And then finally the so-called demand pull economy, whereby instead of manufacturers making things that you buy, you specify what it is that you're looking for and then virtually connect the pieces together to make things work. So we're very much a global organization, about 270 members, about 38 countries. It kind of changes. One of my favorites is that the representative from Fujitsu, obviously a Japanese headquartered company, is a Frenchman that lives in California. So we have a good example there of the global nature of the consortium. Right. So what we've been doing then to make that happen is beginning really with an ecosystem, because one of the reasons that the founders founded the organization is because they found they kept on having to partner and find other partners, especially niche, smaller partners, to make the things work that they wanted to get working. So we have 4 quarterly meetings. Next one's in San Francisco, one after Europe. After that, I think we're down Beijing, that's where we are. So we move around a fair bit, again, global. That's the first part. We usually get 300 or so people turning up to the meetings. The second part is test beds. This is something that I think originated in the IIC. The notion here is to build scaled down real world systems and see what works and what does not. We recently published a short paper on that, some results across multiple test beds. We do also have articles written on specific test beds and their results. One that I find interesting is so-called time-sensitive networking. The idea there is to layer a standard on top of Ethernet so that you can more reliably expect to deliver your packets on time. Right. I mean, obviously you could always deliver them on time if you spend billions of pounds, right? But what you want is to be able to do it reliably in a short amount of time.
So that's a new protocol?
Yes, that's the intention, and we're funneling that to our liaisons so that they can put these into standards, and we have a series of plug fests and so on.
You've been addressing the importance of providers understanding that security isn't the only game in town. Explain the dynamic of that. It seems to imply that sometimes, you know, if we stress security issues too much, we're going to be sort of thwarting ourselves really by concentrating on the wrong thing. Maybe you could elaborate on that a bit further.
Yes, I'd like to step back a little bit to address the idea of whether we're spending too much time on security or too little. One of the features, if you can call it that, of the industrial internet is the convergence of information technology, IT, and operational technology, which is to say technology that is actually controlling the physical plant. And for a OT person running, let's say, a chemical plant or something like that, when you say security to them, what it means is locked doors, barbed wire, armed guards, that kind of thing. Whereas if you say security to an IT person, obviously you get a completely different set of words coming back at you. So it's less that we're focusing too much on security. I certainly would never say that, but rather that we need to recast security in the bigger picture.
Right.
And that goes then to the things that are the other things that we were talking about.
So how would that sort of show itself in the real world when you do this recasting? How would practitioners change their practice?
Well, it depends on what kind of practitioner you are. If you're an IT person, you need to be thinking about safety. You need to be thinking about resilience. You need to be thinking about reliability, and well, you probably already think about privacy. If you're an OT person, you need to be thinking certainly to some degree about privacy. You may need, in fact, to keep the information about how your machines actually operate on the factory floor secret from your competitors. I mean, that's not an unreasonable thing to ask for. And you need to think about security in the way that IT people think about it as well. And then, of course, you need to reconcile these. And we have different vocabularies, different people, different languages, well, same as vocabulary, I suppose, but most of all different cultures. Because the IT guy thinks nothing of saying, oh, I'll just download some software to my phone. Actually, it just did it. I just noticed it went beep. You wouldn't do that in a factory because of all the compliance that you have to go through.
Yes. So there is a real mismatch almost, isn't there, between systems that control the physical world and by definition are a two-way pieces, and information systems which are somehow fluffier. They're just gathering. They're sort of gathering information, aren't they? And they're not immediately affecting the real world situation. So is that a good way of describing it?
I think that's a good way of starting to describe the underlying difference. Yes. Right? And then from that, that's how you get the two cultures. Yes. And then you're trying to bring them together, and then everything else that I said fits in.
But the lack of that reconciliation probably at the base of the security problems that we have with some of the current IoT deployments, isn't it?
Yes, no. I mean, there's no convergence problem, for example, with security breaches at Experian a few weeks ago. That's not an industrial IoT problem. No, so that problem is a different one. It's people don't pay enough attention to security, which is why, of course, I never say that we're spending too much time on security, because we can't.
Okay, so you talked too about earning trust with potential end users and how fundamental that must be. Do you think you can sort of elaborate on that a bit more, and do you think the industry has paid too little attention to the idea of trust and building trust now?
I'd be nervous about saying that anyone pays too little attention, because we all have limited time and so on and so forth. Again, I'd like to step back a little bit. The word that has kind of come into the culture, if you like, into the vocabulary, is less trust, which may be what I have in you, but trustworthiness, which is a property of you, right? So they're different, So I prefer to use the word trustworthiness, and I think that it's always been there, right? I mean, if you think about a chemical plant, it's been running for 20 years. They're extremely process driven. They know how the process is supposed to work. They are trustworthy, right? But they become untrustworthy if they just then say, oh, Industrial Internet of Things, wonderful. Let's connect it to the network and have the password be admin.
Yes.
Right? That makes it untrustworthy.
But they wouldn't do that, of course.
Well, I certainly hope not, but...
That's why they're trustworthy.
What's your password?
Yes, that's right. Okay. So what do you think, what's the outlook like as far as the Industrial Internet Consortium, and how does it differ from just the normal Internet of Things? The Industrial Internet of Things is different from the Internet of Things?
Yes, not in terms of technology. They're the same technology as cheap computers, cheap sensors, lots of data, ability to analyze it, blah, blah, blah. The main differences are business drivers. So instead of I need the device to be cheap so people will buy it, you're more focused on return on investment. You would like your phone to be secure, but mine's only got 4 digits in the password. It wouldn't take that long to crack it if you absolutely had to. But you need it to be really secure if you're talking about a chemical plant that could dump a whole lot of toxic chemicals in the river. So it's quality of service, efficiency, industrial strength security, and all the other things that we talked about, reliability, privacy, blah, 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 that make it different, right? So it's not technology, it's the business drivers.
Very narrow point of your ecosystem building, how most effectively can you do that?
Okay, so in addition to the ecosystem and the test beds that I talked about, we've also published a set of frameworks. The Industrial Internet Security Framework obviously is one that has been talking about this trustworthiness idea and some of the ideas that I've talked about today. We published before that a reference architecture, connectivity framework, a business strategy and innovation framework, and these are pretty serious documents in the sense that they are the combined wisdom of the people who are members of the IIC. So that helps lay a framework, right? But the key issue is going to be getting to talk to the end users, and particularly in certain verticals. So we already have a program, the liaison working group, whose job it is to make arrangements with other organizations, standards development organizations, for example, ISO, IEC, a whole series of letters and numbers until your brain explodes, and a whole bunch of other other consortia, some particular alliances that are focused on particular technologies and so on and so forth. And we've worked over the last 3.5 years to develop those relationships. But the real question, the one that you're asking, is how do you leverage them, right? So we're just beginning a program of identifying specific vertical areas in which we need to be working, and then finding use cases in, let's say, smart energy, identifying test beds that are in that area, identifying standards development bodies and other alliances that are involved in the infrastructure, and most importantly, organizations that are focused on the verticals. So, you want to go to a smart energy conference, right? Not an IAC thing, right? But we need to go to there and ask, what are the problems you're trying to solve, right? And then from that, we can develop a community, a smaller ecosystem focused on that, get that going, and move on to the next one. And so, actually just last week, our steering committee sent out a note to the members saying this is what we're doing, and we think smart energy is a good place to start. What do you think ought to be next? So we're interrogating, we're asking the members, and then of course we need actually to make sure they're going to follow through and actually do stuff. So it has to be this, building something that's self-sustaining.
Yes, absolutely. But then you have to build that effort too and do it in multiple places to keep that going, which is going to be a challenge, I would have thought.
Yes, it is. That's why I've been on the road for 12 straight weeks.
Well, I mean,
this is my last one, my very last one.
I'm sorry about that.
Yes,
yeah, that we're keeping you from your sanity.
Yes, exactly. Too late.
I was going to make an observation and see how you reacted to it, which was that there's a huge range, as we said, there's a huge range of vertical. And the interesting thing that I've discovered is that the power seems to be going not from individual companies who make things or design things and so on, but to the ecosystem that they attach themselves to. And then above that to maybe framework ecosystems like organisations like yours. It's quite a transformation, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, but it's what first off, that I think is a correct observation, so let's be clear about that. But what we have is global supply chains, global value chains. We're going to see over time things coming together across different sectors. And what that's going to mean is that you have to be able to step outside your particular little ecosystem of the people that do chemistry and out into the wider world. And that's what we're trying to do. I mean, that's precisely what we're there for.
What you're trying to do. And do you think that the open source community is actually quite a good template for that kind of thinking?
Yes.
The way that they develop things?
There are multiple ways, obviously, of thinking about it. Standards are helpful. Open source, especially as a way to test things. The testbed program that we have is also, of course, very important to demonstrate what works and what does not, etc.
Yes, that's good. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. That's very interesting. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
Good.